The date is August 23rd, and you walk hurriedly down the streets with your umbrella to beat the rain. Grateful that the weather has finally cooled off, you approach your destination. Walking through the doors of the Stade Casino in Basel, Switzerland, you notice the grand neoclassical building with its elegant columns and high ceilings. The building opened in 1824 and was designed to be simple and elegant. It's 1903. The building that you see is indeed that for its time, not overly opulent, nor was it purely functional. As you enter the hall, you hear the hum of Hebrew, Yiddish, German, Russian, and English mingling together. The air carries a sense of purpose, as many attendees like you travel long distances, often at significant personal cost. As you look around, you become aware that you are one of the 592 delegates representing the diverse Jewish communities from around the world, intellectuals, rabbis, activists, and thinkers, all unified by the common goal of creating a national homeland for the Jewish people. This is your first time as a delegate for the World Zionist Congress, this its sixth gathering, and you're awestruck. Having made great time, arriving early, you take an opportunity to mingle with some of your fellow delegates, wanting to soak up their wisdom. You immediately see Theodor Herzl, the convener of this conference, and make a beeline for him. He welcomes you with open arms. My fellow Zionists, welcome to your first Congress. The Jewish people must not merely be hope for a homeland. We must secure it through political and diplomatic efforts on the international stage. I've said we are a people, one people. We must reclaim our rightful place among the nations. Our state will arise not through speeches or promises, but through power and determination. The world will respect us only when we have the strength of a nation in our own land. If you will it, it is no dream. You see another young man wearing a first-timer badge, Zev Jabotinsky. You ask him about his story to get to know him a bit better. Growing up in Odessa, I never saw a Jewish culture like this. After learning of the Kishinev pogrom, I became convinced. Every people is entitled to its own homeland, and so is the Jewish people. Zionism is a colonizing adventure, and we must build a nation through strength, not compromise. Iron walls, not concessions, will ensure our survival. We must expel the fear from our hearts, for the sword and the book came bound together. Our goal is clear: a Jewish state on both sides of the Jordan. Through Jewish sovereignty, power, and pride, we will fulfill our destiny. Herzl's vision is admirable, but it needs revision. Surprised to hear totalitarianism, you excuse yourself to meet Echad Ha'am. After the usual pleasantries and discussing your distaste for transatlantic ship travel, Echad Ha'am shares his love of Judaism's culture with you. My friend, the goal of our striving is not the political revival of our people, but the revival of the Hebrew spirit. Political sovereignty alone is insufficient. A state is not the highest thing. For what matters is that we create a center for our national spirit, a place where we can develop our culture in freedom. We must build a homeland not only of bodies, but of souls. For the Jewish state will arise when it has first been built in our hearts. Without this, our state will be but an empty shell. Enriched by that conversation, you spot Yitzchak Yaakov Reines, and you walk over. As tends to happen at conferences, your conversation quickly veers into business, and you learn about Rabbi Reines' religious expression. As I've said, Zionism is not merely a matter of politics, but of divine destiny. It's messianic. As I have said, the national revival of Israel must be a spiritual revival based on the Holy Torah. Without Torah, our national movement will lack its true foundation and strength. Herzl's efforts to establish a state are praiseworthy, but we must always remember that Zionism without Judaism is not Zionism. Our people's return to Zion is the will of God in the eternal bond between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. That bond is sacred. Filled with all of this wisdom, of Herzl's political, Jabotinsky's revision, Echad Ha'am's cultural, Rabbi Reinus's religious plans and aspirations for Zionism, you enter the hall and take your seat, one of 592, just as this session is gavelled to order. In Herzl's opening address, he responded to the violent murder of 50,000 Jews during the Kishinev pogrom by leaning into his nature as a political Zionist. He introduced to the delegation the Uganda Plan, a proposal by British colonial secretary Joseph Chamberlain to create a Jewish homeland in British East Africa. Herzl said, "The offer has been extended to us in a way which cannot but contribute to the improvement of the condition of the Jewish people, without our relinquishing any of the great principles on which our movement is founded. Zion, Uganda is certainly not, and can never become." Max Nordau, Herzl's friend and confidant, followed and said, "The Uganda Plan is the only plan, and we must, in a word, play the politics of the hour." This proposal, as you might imagine, was immediately lambasted and supported by only a small few. Yet, because they were 4 months past the slaughter of 50,000 Jews, the Congress, by a narrow margin, agreed to send a commission to East Africa to investigate the possibility of Uganda. After the vote, the gathering devolved so quickly in its 4 days that a young Leon Trotsky, there as a journalist, foretold, thankfully incorrectly, the end of the Zionist movement. And afterward, Herzl quickly realized that he had unwittingly unleashed a tempest he could not control. And this plan was so hated that a Zionist activist attempted to assassinate Max Nordau a few months later. Speaking in 2024, I know many are worried that the new rabbi is going to talk politics, so I'm going to say it right now. I'm grateful that the Uganda Plan was resoundingly defeated at the 7th Zionist Congress in 1905. That is politics, everyone. For many of us who were raised with an idealized story of the Zionist dream, this historical fact is confusing. Theodor Herzl, the founder of modern Zionism, the one figure still idealized by the entire Israeli political spectrum, presented and pushed a plan that many would consider ignorant at best. And Herzl wasn't alone. Judah Magnus was a prominent American Reform rabbi, a Zionist leader, the founding president of Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He advocated for a binational Jewish-Arab state in Palestine, promoting coexistence and dialogue between Jews and Arabs. Agudat Yisrael, an ultra-Orthodox organization founded in Poland in 1912, and currently with 4 members in the Israeli Knesset, rejected Zionism for decades because it was being led by secular Jews. In 1885, the American Reform Movement published the following sentence in its inaugural set of guiding principles: "We consider ourselves no longer a nation, but a religious community, and therefore expect neither a return to Palestine nor the restoration of any of the laws concerning the Jewish state." Can you imagine the anti-Semitism if we'd colonized Uganda? Can you imagine what horrific names someone would be called today if they advocated for a binational state or a Jewish state outside the land of Israel? I mean, of course we can. Social media rarely leaves anything for the imagination. I love teaching this moment in Jewish history because Israel's greatest danger isn't from those wishing Israel's disappearance, but from within. We've narrowed our Zionist tent, fostering discord and Jew-on-Jew hatred, letting political divisions seep into our hearts, minds, and communities. This harms us, our community, in Israel. When we look at the 592 delegates of the Sixth Zionist Congress and the other delegations from similar Zionist gatherings, we find an incredibly diverse group of Jews. They arrived with different nationalities, languages, religious practices, different perspectives, and socioeconomic lifestyles. Despite these differences, they united as Zionists, not around how to achieve their goals, but around the shared belief that a Jewish state in our ancestral homeland matters. If I had the opportunity to walk into the Stad Casino on that evening, I would love to meet with Echad Ha'am, the founder of cultural Zionism, and ask him about this moment at the Sixth Zionist Congress and how that can help us today. Echad, in a moment of immense discord, what brings us together as Jews? Chase, the Jewish people has survived not by might, but by its power of self-reflection and renewal. In the exchange of ideas, we find our strength, and the strength of our people does not lie in political force, but in the strength of our spirit, in the values we embody. Rabbi, from where do our values come? Torah, duh. Our ancient literature is a precious treasure because it contains the soul of our nation. Let our moral, intellectual, and cultural traditions guide you. They've gotten us this far. Why not another few millennia? And so, we shall. 2,000 years ago, out of the ashes of our Second Temple, my rabbinic colleagues declared that 3 of the sacred obligations, 3 mitzvot that are limitless in our ability to perform, as well as to derive benefit from, are to welcome guests, visit the unwell, and accompany the dead to burial. This is our moral obligation to our people and to our Israeli brothers and sisters. Fulfilling these mitzvot means that we must actively reach out to those we know. It means befriending Israelis in our community, hugging them and offering them support. It means saying hello to our Shinshinit, Adi Lemberger, an 18-year-old Israeli spending a year of service here in Atlanta before she enters the IDF. She's here on Sunday mornings supporting our religious school. It means supporting our congregants whose children who grew up in our community, who've deployed to Gaza for multiple tours, and whose families live running between bomb shelters. It means joining our Israeli brothers and sisters in demanding that our hostages be brought home now and standing with them to protect Israel's precious democracy. Before October 7th, hundreds of thousands of Israelis marched in the streets weekly to protest the extremely right-wing government's attempts to subvert Israel's judiciary. And on September 1st, after 6 of the hostages were murdered, 6% of Israel's entire population protested in Tel Aviv at once. Yes, they blamed Hamas, but the loudest cries of our family and friends expressed anger at Prime Minister Netanyahu and the government. Just to understand the scope of these protests, the pre-October 7th protests that were happening last spring, I saw many of them when I was there. Imagine the entire population of Georgia marching down Peachtree every Saturday evening for 6 months. And to contextualize September 1st, that 6% number, twice the population of the state of Georgia marching down Peachtree, united with one goal and one voice. In a recent poll, 83% of Israelis rated the IDF as good or excellent since October 7th, while 58% of Netanyahu's own coalition did not believe he'd done a good job. In Israeli society, there is a firewall between the people who are Israel and the government and its politicians. Remember Echad Ha'am's words from our initial encounter, a state is not the highest thing. Critiquing Israel and Israeli policies is normal. Jews argue. But we must be educated to do so. We will unite and overcome our divisiveness by perpetuating our people's intellectual tradition. We must work to become better educated on Israel's history and culture, the conflict with the Palestinian people in the wider region, and the virulent anti-Semitism that we encounter in every walk of life. Judaism's pedagogy for exchanging divisive ideas comes from the Babylonian Talmud, Eruvin 13b. In this 1,500-year-old text, we learn about the debates between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, two differing schools of Jewish thought. Talmud teaches us that Beit Hillel's rulings are almost always accepted over Beit Shammai for three reasons. Because Beit Hillel was more lenient and tolerant, because Beit Hillel studied both their opinions and the opinions of Beit Shammai, and Beit Hillel went so far as to study Beit Shammai's rulings first. In previous professional roles, and as the current president of Purdue University Hillel's Board of Governors, I've counseled young adults troubled by hearing terms like apartheid and genocide used regarding Israel. If their first encounter with these terms is from anti-Israel hate groups, we have failed them. We have failed our Israeli brothers and sisters, and we have failed the intellectual integrity of our people. We must educate our community on these terms and why they are inaccurate. This is not a simple thing I'm mentioning here. One does not flip a light switch and put learning dates on the calendar, though you can for sure expect that. This demands the voices of many community stakeholders to make it happen, as well as considerable time from our staff with Rabbi Alter's leadership to implement. We need our entire congregation to engage with the beauty and complexity of Israel's history. When our narrative is challenged, simply saying it's complicated will not suffice. There's no better way to demystify Israel than to visit and explore the immense diversity of Jewish cultural traditions. Israel is the most significant Jewish experiment by our people in millennia, and being present, even amidst turmoil, can nourish our souls. Where else can you naturally discuss the harm of Jabotinsky's revisionism while strolling behind religious Zionists carrying Rabbi Reinus's writings, walking past a political institution on Herzl Street in Jerusalem to a coffee shop inspired by Echad Ha'am's cultural philosophies? Okay, that might take a bit of a setup, but it is most likely to happen and most easiest to happen in Israel. I remember being 15 and learning about the Holocaust at Lochamei HaGetaot, a kibbutz founded by Holocaust survivors, before I traveled with an Israeli high school class for a week in Poland. Shout out to Shayagnon High School in Netanya. I'm still awestruck that Israel's rainy season begins almost immediately after Sukkot, days after we switch our liturgy in the Amidah, acknowledging God as from acknowledging God as the one who causes dew to God as the one who makes the wind blow and rain descend. I still remember having sweet potato chips and maple syrup for the first time at the restaurant where Sarah and I had our first date. This is the essence of Echad Ha'am's cultural Zionism, experiencing our shared history, texts, and values in our nation state, in our ancestral homeland. Who wants to go and learn how to overcome division by sitting on Tel Aviv's beaches, eating world-class food that just happens to be kosher, and sitting on a random stone on a hilltop overlooking Jerusalem and thinking to yourself, could my child have sat on this stone? Maybe Herzl. Maybe even Elijah. In 1903, months after unconscionable acts of violence against the Jewish people of Kishinev, 592 Zionists traveled to Basel from around the world, seeking hope and a plan to ensure Jewish safety. Herzl, as expected, appeared with a political plan, loathed by most in attendance. Rabbi Reinus attended following Judaism's religious dictum, to save a life is to save an entire world, and voted in favor. Jabotinsky was there ready to offer his revision, and Echad Ha'am was there eager to use Jewish culture to revive the Hebrew spirit. I wonder what they discussed.